Rahman Rahim, Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen, Rahman Rahim, Maliki Yawmiddin. إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. Amen. So, this is our last session of 2017, or as I like to call it, our first session of 2018 for the non-obsessives, even though it's the 31st of December. We're starting a new year. Okay. And the 31st of December, as I was thinking about this talk, I realized is a very important date for many people in the modern world. New Year's Eve. When I was young, Bismillah, New Year's Eve was supposed to be the great occasion, the summum bonum of the year, the ecstatic time. And every New Year's Eve we looked forward to it, we planned for it, we organized parties, it was going to be the greatest, and every New Year's Eve was a disappointment. I couldn't quite get my head around it, why it was such a disappointment every year, but there was this big build-up, and then there was whatever parties happened, and it was never anything very extraordinary. The other parallel event that was even worse in my early history was graduation dance. That was supposed to be the peak experience, right? I don't know if they still have it, or you didn't participate. Yeah, okay, well, I was secular at the time, and I participated, and this was supposed to be, again, the great event, going to the best restaurant in Montreal, dance, limousine, girlfriend, the whole kit. And that one hit me really hard when it wasn't what I expected it to be. I think I went into depression. And the only thing that lifted me out was I had to study for the final exam, so I had to hype myself up and get roused in order to do well in the exams. But otherwise, I think I would have gone into a real depression. Why? Because my values were all wrong. My values were the values of dunya, the values of worldliness. I was raised on that 50s mentality by my parents that life was good, we were building, industry was flourishing, employment was full. These were the great times. And the theme song that I would hear around my house, the song that my parents played over and over again, was a song, I think from the 50s, which said, "Enjoy yourself, it's later than you think. Enjoy yourself, it's later than you think." And this was the mentality. When you think about it, when I thought about it later, I realized what it meant. It meant life is about enjoyment. Maximize your pleasure. Maximize your recreation, and it'll all be good. I still see people in the local pharmacy in their 80s still trying to maximize their recreational moments, talking about plays and outdoor concerts and not thinking about the fact they're probably not going to be around for that many more years. They're in their 80s already, even if they live to their 90s. No, they're just trying to maximize their recreation. Wrong, to quote Mr. Trump, who people love to hate. Wrong. This is the wrong point of view, and he has many wrong points of view, admittedly. Okay, and one of them is this, that it's all about worldliness. So no. Until I understood that, a friend of mine, an old friend of mine, is somewhat down on religion, and he's often looking for a way to find some flaw in the religion or the religious process. And I've just been meaning to tell him recently, you have no idea what religion can do for you, what it's done for me. Give you a sense of perspective and meaning in life and know why you're here, instead of just trying to have a good time or even trying to be artistic or effective at work. It doesn't cut it. And you end up being depressed, like most people, as they get older. So, this is New Year's Eve. If you don't go to a New Year's Eve party, or if you do and you don't enjoy it, don't get all upset. Don't get flustered. That's the nature of dunya. Dunya is illusion. It continuously, over and over again, disappoints you. One of my teachers, Bawa, used to say that the road to hell is paved with beautiful advertisements. And this is one of the roads to hell. Thinking that recreation is the purpose of life is a road to hell. As you get on and you get less and less pleasure, or you have problems with seeing or hearing or getting out or whatever else happens in old age, the pleasure just keeps going down and the pain just keeps going up. So if your idea about life is maximizing pleasure, you're going to be in trouble. Okay. So, we have the wrong talk here. This is from the last talk. I want to go over some of the issues that we brought up in Cambridge in the talk on Christmas Eve about life, what life is really about, and how life is a series of tests that we undergo. This year again I went to the RIS, and khutbah, which is usually an uplifting one, was given by Imam Zaid from California now. Formerly, I think, from New York. Studied a long time in Syria, and his khutbahs are usually uplifting, I find. And this year, he seemed to be directing it towards, obviously towards everyone, but I could feel a personal significance, and he said the following in his khutbah. If things don't turn out the way you wanted, he actually referred to a student who had failed an exam, but it could be anything, any goal that you've set that's not working out. So if things don't work out the way you wanted, and you did your best, not if you were a slacker, you did your best, it's not your fault. Okay, now, at first you hear it, you say, oh yeah, that's obvious. But if you think a little more deeply, you'll see that the whole, amongst other things, the whole business world and the athletic world is all about accountability. It's the opposite of this. The only thing important is the result. If the result didn't work out, you're accountable. In French they say imputable, and it's your fault. If the Canadians didn't win last night, no matter how well they played, it's their fault. They're accountable. The coach has to go. The players have to be changed. Something has to be done. But Imam Zaid says, no. It's not your fault. The outcome was determined, is in the hands of Allah, not in your hands. You did what you could. You did your due diligence. I like that term. And the rest is in the hands of Allah. So if it doesn't turn out the way you wanted in whatever area of life, this is a test. And there will be plenty of tests. Quran, Surah Al-Baqarah, ayat 155. And most certainly shall we test you, Allah says, by means of danger and hunger and loss of worldly goods, of loss of life and of labor's fruits. But give glad tidings unto those who are patient in adversity. Patient in adversity. Okay. And there's plenty of adversity to go around. Now, the Quran talks about danger and hunger and loss of lives. We have developed in the modern world all kinds of new ways of people being tested. By the brilliance of this democratic, bureaucratic system, we have all kinds of new ways that people are tested. So they're in legal proceedings. For example, they were fired from their job, and now they're taking out a proceeding for illegal dismissal or inappropriate dismissal. Or there's a harassment case, psychological harassment, sexual harassment, physical harassment. You have to go through all the procedures. Or your insurance that you thought you were insured, but you got sick and had a terrible depression and they're refusing to pay you, saying you're still able to work. These are a few of the modern stresses that we've invented. Stress at the workplace. One person now required to do the job of 2 or 3 because they're downsizing, cost cutting, making more efficient, which usually equals more stressful. Another area of suffering. Family and couple conflicts. Everywhere we're seeing it. Divorce rates. John Gottman, the expert in the United States on couple relationships, says they're running about, if you follow a couple through from the beginning of their marriage, 40 years, 60% divorce rate. Imagine what that does to the couple, what that does to their children, what that does to society. Okay, this isn't even mentioned. You notice? Because it wasn't that common. It isn't even mentioned in the ayat. We will test you with divorce. We will test you with conflict with your wife and children. Not even mentioned. I don't even have to go that far back. There was a famous study, Holmes and Ray, in England in the 60s about stress factors that could cause depression. And in that, you won't find couple conflict in there. You won't find stress at work in there. You won't find problems with children in there. All of them existed, but not to such an extent that they had to flag them and study them. So even in the last 50 years, let alone the last 1,500 years, there's been considerable deterioration. So we're tested even more than in previous times. And we're required in all of this to, and mental health issues as well. You know, all over the place we see mental health issues. There were majloobs in traditional Islamic society, but we don't read too much about mental health issues there. Maybe they weren't aware of them, or they hid them, but there's a good chance that mental health issues have increased in importance. Schizophrenia may be the same since the beginning of time, but anxiety disorders, depressive disorders, personality disorders are just blossoming everywhere. More tests for the people who have them and for the people around them. So we're very wealthy in terms of tests. There's just a side point I want to make, which I think Muslims get wrong sometimes about patience. Patience is not an absolute, i.e., there are times to act. I was just listening to a documentary about something about business, and they were quoting one of the great business heroes of all times, a guy called Iacocca, who brought, I think, Chrysler Corporation back into business when it was on the verge of bankruptcy. And he said, the most important quality I need in a manager is fill in the blanks. Can you give it a shot? No. Okay. Decisiveness. Okay. Now, that's not patience. That's decisiveness. That's not impulsiveness either, because the decision has to be well grounded in the facts of the situation, of the context. But it's not the same as patience. So sometimes we have to act, and if our Prophet hadn't acted in time to get out of Mecca into Medina, Allah only knows whether we would have a religion nowadays, because there was a time to act, and he was inspired to do so, and he did so. So don't forget action in favor of patience. Patience is not always the answer. In all of this, we have to be aware, even if there's a test, that Allah is behind this test. Allah is behind everything that is occurring. So he knows it's happening, he's the ultimate cause of it happening, and if it's to resolve itself, he will be the power that will resolve it. But this also means that in this test, there is khayr, there is goodness. As they say, every cloud has a silver lining. So there's some kind of goodness in the test. Maybe it's designed for you to learn patience. Maybe it's designed to purify you. Maybe it's designed to elevate you. Maybe it's designed to improve your character. All of these are possible. Because suffering, as Sheikh Hamza Yusuf points out, there can only be 2 sources of suffering. Either it's a consequence of your previous bad actions. The Buddhists and Hindus call this karma. Or it's a means of your purification, a means of your elevation. So we can't assume because someone is suffering, like many of the prophets, Job, for example, are suffering, that they're bad people and they're suffering because they did something. No. No. They're being purified. They're being cleansed to arrive at an even higher station. They're already a prophet, and they're going even higher than that. So suffering may be in our interest. It is in our interest, regardless. Even if it's wiping out a previous bad deed by suffering, it's also in our interest. Now, just as an intro to some of the things that may be coming down the tubes, one of the more common and more difficult tests nowadays is with other people. The famous French philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre used to say, or said famously, "L'enfer, c'est les autres." Hell, the hell worlds is other people. He meant dealing with them. And there are all kinds of difficult people out there. It's a little bit of an advertisement. I'm working now on an article for the blog called Dealing with Character Pathology. There are all kinds of pathological characters out there, and these are tests for us. There are psychopaths and Asperger's and narcissists and obsessives and paranoid people, and I'm trying to define the different categories and see how we can manage to cope with them. But this is all part of Allah's creation. We can't erase this. The vast, vast majority of the time we can't even fix it. We just have to learn to live with it. But these are tests, dealing with other people. And I'm sure anyone who's listening to this tape knows what I'm talking about. So we're asking Allah to give us patience and to give us wisdom and to give us discernment in dealing with all these tests, and mostly to give us also perspective, context, that we're heading to the afterlife. There was a lady who posted her, did you see this, the near-death experience in French? And she was saying she saw the Prophet, alhamdulillah. And he said, she was in the heavenly world, said, this is the reality. That reality, dunya, where we are, that's just a testing ground. So don't worry so much about it, but he also said, but get closer to your religion, practice it more. Don't worry about this. They said, oh, religious people are fanatics, they're doing all these terrible things, religion. Don't listen to any of this propaganda. The religion is a tool. Like sometimes I use the example of a hammer. You can build a house or smash in someone's head, yes. But the hammer is a useful instrument. The religion is an even more useful instrument for self-improvement, for improving your relationship with God, for improving your internal state. Use it. And of course, and the practices that we do in Sufism. All of these are ways of purifying ourselves and getting into a better state. And that is worth more than anything in all of dunya. I hope I'm clear. Any questions? Anything like that? Subhana rabbika rabbil izzati amma yasifun salamun Fatiha. That was about 20.